Welcome to the Warlord Workbench. My name is Rich C, and today we're taking you through the workbench with Stug 3 Alfs G, the veritable tank hunter for the German forces in World War II. Let's crack on with the unboxing. So we've got one 56 scale hard plastic World War II assault gun, which can be built either of the Stug 3 Alfs G or the Stu 42 with the 105 howitzer. We've got the stat cards, full colour water slide decal sheet, construction leaflet and damage markers. So go for some of the exciting stuff first. We've got stat cards, complete with information that you need to be using the model through the game. And on the other side we've got when it can be used and the who by, along with when you're building your army, its points values. Rather handy for the game. The blast markers, we can have a look at these in a little bit. Fine decal sheet, all water slide, and of course the instruction leaflet. The sprue comes in two parts. Part one is all your track details, and we can see plenty of detail on this. So that's the unboxing, and we'll see you in the next video for building the tank. Welcome back to part two of the tank build with the Stug 3G. So we're looking at building the tracks. Now I've already cut a couple of bits out here, and when you're following the instructions it's always a good idea to check the fit as you go. We've just popped a little bit of glue where we need it around the holes, and we'll pop this into place using these two little lugs to line up, making sure our teeth are pointing inwards because the tracks will obscure the teeth around here. Then we can line up the top track. First we'll just test fit, make sure we know where it's going. Now with this kit you've got nice little slots at the end to make sure that you line up correctly. Pop it on and you should find that there's a nice even gap all the way along, and just a gentle squeeze at either end to make sure you get rid of any gaps that might be showing at the end of the tracks. In the tradition of Blue Peter, here's one I've built earlier. You can see that the track has now been glued onto the hull, and in this case I've added the track links. Now all we have to do is line up with these side parts, make sure they fit in nicely, and make sure the top is flush with the hull, and we'll slot this into place. Now you can give it a bit of squeeze. So some of the small details on the hull just need finishing. We've added the toe brackets, and it's always best to add these plates before we add the final exhaust part, because this will cover some of those when it goes in place, and drop it in. It's got locating lugs, so it'll quite happily sit where it needs to, and ready for the top half of the hull. So you've got the 75mm anti-tank gun or the 105mm howitzer. Today we'll choose the 75mm. Now we'll start off with getting this gun glued on. Just slot it in, wipe away any excess glue. So with the gun now glued into place and the glue wiped off, we'll now need to pop it into the hull. So for this we need to rotate the tank over, and the gun itself, making sure that it's the right way up, will come in from the outside and hold it in position that we can get this part, which would be the breech, to then slot in to position, and that will rest on a couple of nice little joints and leave the gun showing on the other side. With the gun now in place, we're going to glue the holder into position. Now we've got to be real careful when gluing this bit in to be able to keep the gun barrel so that it moves. We'll just need to make sure glue goes just into the holes. So we'll set that in place and just leave that to dry. Okay, so we've gone ahead and done some of the detail work. We've made sure that the gun works, and we've now started adding some of the details like the smoke canisters and the extra armour plates, filters and sights. But there are some pieces that are quite small that we handy to glue into place, but not with glue on the top of the surface detail. Let's take this fire extinguisher for example. If we pop it into place with glue, we could get glue all across the deck detail. So if we pop it into position, dry fit, hold it in place, turn it upside down, and we can just pop a bit of glue into position and melt the ends of the actual stubs that come through. We're going to go ahead and add further details. Check your location points and check it all fits into position. And the great thing about this kit is you can build it in 2 halves and take your time on getting these nice and neat. We've just finished sticking together all the loose little parts, adding on all those final details. Now we're ready to marry up the 2 halves. We'll get our glue and we'll just bring those 2 halves together. Everything sits in place where it needs to, bit of a squeeze, and we have one stug ready to paint. What you'll notice though is we've left the side skirts off. These can be glued on once we've done the painting. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next part tomorrow for getting painting. Welcome back for the next part on painting. So our Stug 3 has now had a spray colour of Celtic Red primer, followed by the Desert Yellow primer. These 2 sprays, fantastic for giving you nice clean effect. Nice and even coat. 2 or 3 coats as opposed to one thick one. And it just gives us a bit of tone and a track colour to start us off. With the side shields, I've left them off so that we can paint easier. Now we're going to grab our base colour, our Desert Yellow. So we mixed up some colour and now we're getting our plates and we're just going to go along the top edge. Nice thin coat. Because it's a 100% colour match, shouldn't see much difference, but I like to just draw some paint down in the streaks. It helps with that subtle weathering. So again, what we're trying to do is just catch the top edges and the high edges, just bring the colour back, any shadowed areas that didn't get spray. Once you're happy and you've covered the whole tank, we can do some highlighting. Now we're going to go round and brush in a 50-50 mix of Desert Yellow and Skeleton Bone. Get a nice little mix going. Once we've got the mix, I'm going to use a bit of tissue, and with this mix I'm just going to brush it out of my brush here until there's not much coming off, and I'll press lightly. And all I'm going to do is pick up the edges and draw down a bit. So hopefully we'll get a nice sort of slight subtle toning going on there. I'll do the same with this one. Okay, we're going to do the same with the tank. Now we can be quite vigorous with the tank, but you'll notice that I'm using my brush strokes all in the same direction. So we're catching the top edge of the tank and we're drawing it down. So this dry brush technique, fantastic technique to get to grips with as early as you can when you're beginning painting. So I've got the basic colour done. I'm now going to move on to some camouflage by using Oak Brown for a bit of camouflage. So we'll just give the brush a bit of a clean. We don't want it too watery, so we can outline the pattern that we want and then fill it in. And this was all down to the workshops to come across with whatever colours they had to hand to get the tanks painted up. Now it's gone on fairly thin, which is what we're after, and we can just continue that along the panels. Now sometimes these panels would have been knocked off in combat and replaced, so what I'm going to do is just avoid painting one of them. Once you've got the outline, fill it in. Better to do 2 or 3 coats and get a nice result. We'll carry on down onto the tank. I've already been experimenting with some colours to find the colour I wanted, and then we'll just carry on. Don't worry too much if you make a mistake, you can always come back to it. Right, we've done the brown, we've done 2 or 3 coats where needed to build that up, and now we're moving on to a next colour, which should be elf green. We'll just mix some of that on the palette. It's the same principle, we just start near the edge, bit of an idea of what pattern you want, draw in an outline and fill it up and just gradually work your way over. So this one goes on fairly nicely. Once this is dry, I'll go around and do a second coat. The camouflage is now done, and I'm going to move on to doing some more detail work. To begin with, I'm going to use Chaotic Red, same as the original spray, and I'm going to use that to paint the tracks. Small dry brush at the moment. Yeah, quite a handy little brush as it's got a nice flat tip. And that just allows me to get the paint in. It's quite bright, don't worry, it's going to be toned down with the ink in a little bit. I've now used uniform grey to put some details in place, like the trim around the wheels, where metal will go, like the machine gun. I haven't worried about the tracks here or anything underneath, because these plates will sit over those and hide them. So we're just going to use gunmetal, give it a good shake, because all the metal fragments and flecks of paint will sink to the bottom, being heavier. And all we're going to do with this is I'm going to stick with my trusty dry brush, just a bit of that, and then we're going to go around the metal. Not worried about these bits, we're just talking about the metal like the machine gun, just to bring out a bit of a metallic effect. Look at where else the metal might need to be brushed on, and I'm going to start with the tracks. Just brush that around where they'd be running on the surface. Obviously tanks get chipped and knocked about. I'm quite happy with that one. So I think that's all the metal. Might just put a bit along the bottom edges here. So this is where we're going to use soft tone. I'm using soft tone because it's got a much browner finish to it than some of the other colours like strong tone and dark tone. Don't need to add any water. We'll be popping it on all over the tank now. You can see just a thin coat over the basic armour is already changing its colour slightly. But now I'm going to use a bit of strong tone, which is a much darker finish, for any oil streaks, and that's going to help me work in some detail around the deck. Oh, missed a bit of that. That looks like a nice rusty jack. I'll do a bit more on the tracks, just helping tone it down. Not too worried about the tracks because we're going to muddy them up. And the same with the grey around these ones. So now we're moving on to the decals. Cut them from the base sheet. Fairly neat, but not too close to the actual decal itself. And then we'll just need to hold it in the pot of water for about 20 to 30 seconds. Just dampen the area. Right, so the decal's nearly ready to come off. We'll just test to see if it will slide easily. All I'm doing is gently teasing it away from the backing paper. And then with a wet brush still, I can move this decal around until it's where I want it. Now I've already put some decals on, so I'll just check that I'm getting it about right, in line with the other one that I've put on. You can be as picky as you like. We've got a bit of time to move it around, and when we're happy with where that decal finally sits, we're going to get a bit of tissue paper, and we're just going to very carefully dab and let the water soak up. We're not going to rub, we're just letting the water soak into the tissue. We're going to use a little bit of anti-shine varnish. Now this has two effects. One is going to dull down the paper that the decal is printed on, so it blends into the rest of the tank. And two, it fixes the decal better in place. Do the same here, just that whole section. Just blend that decal in, and do the same with each marking in turn. And one final one on the front there. So we'll come back when this is dry, and we'll do the last bits of weathering, which will include mud. But before I do all of that, I'm going to put the side panels on, and we're almost finished. Just brought in our static grass, ready to do some weathering and mud effects. First off, I'm just going to run around with the soft tone again, and this is just to help tone the decals back in with the previous weathering that I've done. So we're just going to drop a bit of ink over the top of them, and it just tones them slightly. And now we're going to do a bit of mud. Now the mud, this is where we hide some of that effect the grey on the wheels is going to be our oak brown again. We'll put a bit on the pallets and we're going to sprinkle on some of our static grass. And then what we're going to do is pick up a lump on our brush and we're going to start placing that mud anywhere in the tracks that we want to get that goopiness in. And just spreading it on, plenty of mud, sticks everywhere. Remember, we're on the Russian front with this colour scheme, so we can go to town on this, and don't be afraid to slap it all in. This large lump, we just spread it around a bit. So we just keep moving it around. If you get a big clump, just scrape a bit off. Of course, mud will get kicked up at the back, so we're going to get plenty up on the back of the deck there. We've just finished off adding on a bit more brown, a little bit of static grass, and just adding it on where we want it. Nice goopy mess on the tracks, just where you'd expect them to be. You've even got bits hanging from the bottom of the tank, off the tracks, off the mud guards, off the back of the tank in places. And when you're happy with all these bits, you can also just add a few little bits here and there, just a bit of static grass on the top. It will stick into the paint quite happily. Just adds that bit of greenery on there. The tails come up. Same at the front here. All that's left to do now is really varnish the tank. Probably use a spray for that, but essentially it's ready for the Battlefield.